Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Real Estate Market Watch for February 20th, 2024. Well, let's jump right into it. Mortgage rates have been climbing since the beginning of the year. Not much on a week-over-week basis here the past couple of weeks, but we didn't have the best inflation news in the most recent CPI report, and so consequently, we've seen interest rates bump up a little bit. The confidence that rates were going to be coming down sooner in the year is starting to wane, and it's looking like maybe more like summer for some of those cuts that the Fed was talking about. So we've seen mortgage rates jumping up here week over week just a little bit. We saw rates jump up from 7.08% on Mortgage News Daily's survey last week to this week, we're looking at 7.11% for their survey. So again, small jump, but since the beginning of the year, rates have been climbing. If we look back at last year at the same time, we saw rates were at 6.88%, so not too far off last year's pace as well. And last year was very competitive in the springtime. A lot of that had to do with inventory. And then rates also climbed up a bunch into the low to mid eights in 2023. So the expectation for 2024 is that rates would then be coming down in that same time period, which would then add fuel to the fire from where we're at right now. But we find ourselves in a similar place with low inventory in the Seattle area heading into the spring market, which primes us for competition. So let's look at the stats from last week in King and Snohomish County. And if I pick these up here, we're looking at new listings, 379 new listings for residential single-family houses in King and Snohomish County. Last week, we had 368, so slight uptick from last week. Last year, only 301 new listings in the same time period. So a little bit more activity coming on, a little bit more homes coming on the market here in 2024 so far, at least for this given week. Back on the market, we saw 41 houses come back on the market. Last year, we had 54. So last year, we were seeing more houses that didn't sell in 2022 coming on back in spring 2023 and then selling. We saw price reductions this last week, 102 price reductions. Last week, 78. Same week last year, 171. So still fewer than we saw last year, but a little bit of an uptick there in those price reductions in King and Snohomish counties. Listing price increases. This one always makes me laugh, and I don't usually share it, but I will this week. We had 36 price increases. A lot of those are either accidental listing prices from the listing agent. Maybe they put it on at a price that was a typo, essentially, or in other cases, they were off the market. Maybe they sold for a little over asking price, came back on the market after an inspection or something, and then bumped up that price. Those are two pretty common scenarios for those list price increases. Contingent sales, this is one I want to sit on just for a sec. We saw 9 last week in King and Snohomish County. Again, out of all of the pending sales, there were 682 pending sales last week in King and Snohomish County. 9 isn't a very large percentage of contingent purchases. That is a house that was purchased with a contingency or a requirement for their other house to sell first before closing. Now, in a competitive market, pretty non-existent. We saw 17 last year and only 9 this year. So we were seeing a decline in those contingent purchases year over year. Week over week, 13 versus 9. Not a huge drop off from last week, but something we're going to keep an eye on. As the market heats up and gets more competitive, we're going to see fewer and fewer of those contingent purchases. Now, expired listings, only 13 this last week. It's not the end of the month. Typically, listing agreements are expiring towards the end of a given month, but we'll pay a little closer attention to that when we get towards the end of February, maybe next week and the week after. Now, pending sales, 682 pending sales. That is an uptick from 661 last week, which is good. We're seeing a lot of activity in the market. Again, new listings, 379 versus the pending listings. And those would be homes that were under contract already, pending inspection, and then I would consider it closer to sold or would have gone straight to pending from being active. So they're not exactly double, right, the new listings, but we're seeing that homes that are coming on the market are coming off. We're not seeing a big buildup of inventory right now or houses available for buyers, which is a problem, right? We're not even in a low interest rate environment yet. We're still very much in the sevens and upper sixes, and that's not going to fuel the fire, so to speak. It's the expectation right now of rates coming down. But if those rates start coming down, we're going to see a lot more buyers, and we're not seeing any type of inventory buildup at the moment. Now, sold listings, 392 versus 353, so a pickup from last month. Last year, we saw 429 sold listings in the same week. There were a lot of sales that were kind of houses, I would say, that were sitting on the market at the end of 2022 and then selling early 2023, maybe for some pretty steep discounts. So this year, we're not having that. We didn't have as much of an inventory buildup. In fact, we've seen inventory shrinking. And that was happening last year too, a little bit more dramatically at this point in the year, because there were houses that had been sitting for a while, inventory that had been building up. That's not the case this year. We find ourselves in King and Snohomish County, right around a month or less of supply or houses available, which is a seller's market, meaning that the sellers generally have competition for listings, and also they have the upper edge in the negotiations. As we look at all the data here in King and Snohomish County and really the general Seattle area, what we're seeing is that the buyer activity is picking up. And a lot of that is a result of just pent-up demand, number one, but also the expectation that rates are going to be coming down here this year. We've had the Fed say they're going to drop rates a few different times, but it looks like, again, it's going to be pushed out later in the year, which is why the markets are responding as they are. But if you can lock in a better price, right, with a higher interest rate right now or before the competition picks up, I would say as a buyer, that's a better scenario for you. Personally, I bought a house in 2023. I've got a 7% mortgage right now. I can't wait to refinance that puppy. But right now I've got a 7% rate, historically pretty average, but I got a way better price on my house than I would have if I was to wait to buy that house, and that house wouldn't have been available. So looking at 2024 or even early 2025, there's a chance for me to then refinance my mortgage, get a better rate, but my house is most likely going to be worth quite a bit more than what I paid for it in 2023. So I think there are still those opportunities for buyers where you can get in with that higher rate and a little bit higher monthly payment. But if you can stomach that, I think you're going to come out with a better price, and then you can get that better rate later. You cannot repurchase the house, right? You get the purchase price that you agree to, but that rate, you can get a different rate. So I hear some people saying, date the rate, marry the house. I'm not really a cliche guy, so I don't like it much, but that is the idea, that you can get a permanent price, but a more transient rate, something that you can change in the future. And I would say that the ideal situation is buying low and then having a low interest rate, right? In some cases, in 2022, people paid a lot and had the lower interest rate, which is great. We may never see those 2.5% to 3% rates again, or at least not for a while. But they also had to pay extra to get that rate on the purchase price. So we're going to see, as competition picks back up, that there will be, number one, higher prices, but also it'll be a lot more difficult to purchase. So if you can get the better price, you're not only getting that better price, but it's easier to purchase before all the competition returns back to the market. And all those buyers in the Seattle area, they didn't just disappear. They maybe didn't buy. Maybe they rented. But we were seeing 10, 15, 20 offers on houses. And for sellers, I would, if I was a homeowner, be excited to see that again, right? But for buyers, that's not very exciting. It's not exciting to think about competing with 10, 15, 20 buyers for a house. And we're seeing multiple offers pretty consistently right now. Talking to lenders I know, personal experience, and also even an appraiser recently, everybody's seeing multiple offers almost every time on those loan files, on those purchase agreements, on the appraisals. So to think that we're not there yet is erroneous. We're just not seeing that data yet being reported. So you're going to hear me talking about home selling over asking price on average again here soon. But this is just the sneak peek on that. So the Seattle area housing market is certainly heating up. If you have questions about buying or selling here in the Seattle area, I'd love to be a resource for you. Of course, if you have questions about the market too and just want to connect, feel free to reach out. And if I can bring value to you on a regular basis, please consider following along.